My name is Amr Bardwaj from 30 minutes ago. The planner, it's me again. I'm a CHCI graduate fellow in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, working on their energy and climate subcommittees. So it's really great to be here. I'm delighted to introduce the session. It's called Building a Climate Resilient Nation, Green American Communities and Business. First, on behalf of CHCI, I'd like to thank the Walton Family Foundation, American Honda Motor Company, Anheuser-Busch, Hyundai Motor America, and Natural Resources Defense Council for their generous support of this session. And we're going to look in this session at how, with roughly 6 out of 10 Americans alarmed by climate change, an increasing number of consumers are doing more to demand environmentally friendly products, services, and practices from American businesses. We'll hear from a panel of distinguished experts who are tackling this very issue. But before we jump into that important discussion, it's now my honor to introduce the session chair for this panel, Representative Veronica Escobar. Rep. Escobar, a third-generation El Pasoan, proudly represents Texas's 16th congressional district. She took office on January 3rd, 2019, as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives after making history as the first woman elected to this seat and the first of 2 Latinas from Texas to serve in Congress. Rep. Escobar serves on the prestigious House Judiciary Committee, House Armed Services Committee, House Ethics Committee, and the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. In addition, she serves as Vice Chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Military Personnel. Welcome, Rep. Escobar.
So much. Buenos dias. It's so wonderful to be here together, CHCI, back in the house. So wonderful. I'd like to thank our fabulous moderator, our great panelists, and each and every one of you for being here today to talk about really what is one of the most pressing issues across the globe, but really also one of the most pressing issues for communities of color and disadvantaged communities that generally feel the brunt of the climate crisis most significantly. I want to thank CHCI for convening everybody and can't wait for the gala tomorrow night so that we can all party together like we did in the past. But you know, this is a really serious issue that I hope this conversation is able to ferret out some great paths forward, some solutions, but also some key collaborations. For the first time, Congress has taken robust historic action when it comes to the climate crisis. And I think it's important that we celebrate that we recognize that. Even with a slim majority in the House, a 50-50 Senate, we have delivered $700 billion in climate action investments between the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The key for us going forward, though, is making sure there is equity in how those funds are rolled out, making sure that vulnerable communities are at the forefront of receiving that investment, making sure that we hold each other accountable, the private sector, the public sector, consumers, regular citizens. I want to share one quick thing with you before I close out my brief welcome. In my community, one of the things that we've done, my office has convened a task force of sorts to begin to create a climate action framework. So sort of a list of expectations that we have of the private sector, of local governments, of nonprofits, so that we can prepare as that $700 billion is rolled out. What do we as a community need to do to make sure we get our fair share? How do we make sure that a community of color like El Paso, 85% Hispanic, that we are at the front of the line, ready for grants, ready for the rollout of these funds? So it's more than just Congress acting. Absolutely, Congress has an important role, and we will going forward. This investment, in my view, is a down payment. But what do the rest of us have to do? What should we do? How can we keep each other accountable? How can we collaborate? How can we make the most of this important opportunity to save our planet? So with that, I want to thank you so much for your interest in this issue, for your leadership. I want to thank everyone here for their vision. Have a great session and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Escobar, for highlighting these really huge legislative wins that we've had in this session of Congress, and the big challenge and opportunity of actually starting to implement those laws. So I'd like to now introduce our sponsor speaker. It's going to be a speech provided by Mara Mcdonald, the Environment Program Director at the Walton Family Foundation. Please come up, Mara.
Thank you. I'm Maura McDonald, and I serve as the Environment Program Director at the Walton Family Foundation. I loved hearing from the Congresswoman because that's what we really try to do, is help farmers and ranchers and communities meet that moment where we have federal dollars available to help protect water in the face of climate change. So our experience, whether it's with farmers in the Midwest or with ranchers in the Southwest, is that people understand climate change through the lens of water. Whether it's too much or too little, floods, droughts, wildfires, megastorms, these events all make climate change crystal clear in people's lives. And the Walton Family Foundation also believes that those who are closest to the problem are best positioned to find solutions. So when we work with communities, again, farmers in the Midwest or ranchers in Nevada, with advocates, with industries, and with other philanthropic partners, we try to bring people together to support innovation and collaboration that can help us make progress and find shared and durable solutions to protect and conserve water as climate change continues. That's why the foundation is pleased to sponsor this panel, to hear from these leaders and how they're working with their industries and their communities to fight climate change and to build a vision for a climate resilient future.
All good. Thank you, Mara. Now, let's begin this conversation with this lovely panel that we have here. We're delighted to have as our moderator for this session, Mark Magana. He's the founding president and CEO of Green Latinos, a national network of Latino environmental and conservation advocates. Mark is the first Latino to have served as senior staff at both the White House and in congressional leadership, as special assistant to President Clinton for the White House Legislative Affairs and senior policy advisor to the House Democratic Caucus Vice Chair Robert Menendez. Mark also served as a presidentially appointed congressional liaison at the Department of Health and Human Services, as legislative assistant to Congressional Representative Jim McDermott, as a federal legislative representative for the city of Los Angeles, and as a research assistant for the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. Wow, that's got me working, Mark. Well, let's welcome our moderator, Mark Magana, and I'll give the floor to you. Thank you.
And thank you, Amar, and thank you to CHCI for hosting yet another fantastic public policy agenda panel, and for making sure that our issues, the issues of climate change, the issue of resilience, are front and center. One of my colleagues was in the plenary earlier today. Hopefully you were able to see that. And then now today and yesterday they had an event on Puerto Rico, so it's been fantastic. One of my duties is to remind you about the CHCI conference hashtag. So as you're tweeting, it's hashtag CHCIHHM22. I want to make sure I recognize Amar, Moira, and also the Congresswoman who has done extensive work for her community in El Paso to preserve and protect land. The Kashner Range is a battle right now to fight to be able to take that military range, clean it up, and bring it back to the people so that they can use it and enjoy it and breathe that fresh air. The city of El Paso has suffered a lot, and we need to be able to provide things like that for them. I'm very excited about today. My name is Mark Magana. I'm from Los Angeles. I grew up less than a mile from the 405 freeway, the 605 freeway, and the 22 freeway. In the 1970s, in the mornings we would wake up. We wouldn't just look at the weather report, we'd look at the air report. And they would say whether it was safe for children or the elderly to go out and play. We'd always ignore it, and we'd go out and play anyways. But the days of high red alert were too often. And the number of times that we had to stop playing because a friend had an asthma attack. Fortunately, most of our friends had an asthma inhaler on hand, but if they didn't, we knew which house was closest to be able to run over there, to be able to get the service from a parent, or to run to a hospital we had to. That was normal to us. It was normal to us to be able to have to be aware of that and the potential for a child to die, which happens much too often in our community. These things, the work that we're doing now to fight climate change, the existential threat, is for our children, it's for our families, it's for the future generations. And so I'm very excited that it's not only advocates, it's not only the elected leaders, it's the business leaders that are also part of this effort. We all know that this is affecting our families. We all have families, we all have communities. And so there's no denying the time that we're in. And so hearing from the business leaders, the activists, about how we can transform our local communities for good is what this panel is about. And how we can incentivize more Americans and businesses and community leaders to take on this fight on climate change, because it's going to benefit all of us in the short term, in the middle term, and in the long term. I'm delighted to be joined by 4 experts who I will be calling upon to do a quick introduction in a minute to explore and tackle this topic that we have before us. And then we're going to be taking questions from the audience after I have some introductory questions. So please start thinking about your good questions, and then we'll have you up at the microphone a little bit later in this session. And again, hit that hashtag, CHCIHHM22. So let's welcome our panelists. I'm going to start with Jay Joseph from America Honda Motors. Jay, if you'd introduce yourself and give us a 1 minute.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you. And I had some prepared comments, and I'm inspired by the Congresswoman and Maura and you, and I'm going to throw those out and introduce myself a little differently. So you probably moved to DC about the time that I moved to LA, and so I benefited from some of the cleanup work that had been done during your childhood and your lifetime. But I remember the day that I moved to LA, it was July 4th of 1995. And I grew up in a small town in southern Wisconsin, more dairy cows than people, and really blue skies. And when I moved to LA, I'd only been west of the Mississippi twice in my life, once for my interview, and then when I moved there. And driving into LA through Riverside, through San Bernardino, I was driving with my friend Steve, and we were looking at the sky, and I thought, I can't do this. I can't live in a place where the sky is brown. I think I've just made the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't. It turned out great, because the further west we went, the sky got better. But it's a completely different environment now because of the work that's been done by the California Air Resources Board, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and many others that have changed the environment that we live in. So that's my LA origin story, I guess. But really listening to what Maura said and what the Congresswoman said, the moment that we're in right now, the auto industry is in a transformational moment. And not just the auto industry, but our whole relationship with personal mobility and energy. So for the first time, personal mobility and energy are changing simultaneously. Now, that change is scary for us as a company. Now, Honda, really what the thought that you triggered for me is, since the 1970s, Honda's had this internal mantra of blue skies for our children, that we've been the highest fuel efficiency, lowest emissions full-line auto manufacturer for as long as EPA has been tracking that, because we have to pass on a better world to the next generation. But we're in this transformational moment, and that moment, the best part of that is it means opportunity for everybody, for those who see through it and seize that moment. So I think as a theme today, I'd really like to leverage that and focus on the opportunities that it affords different communities, different constituencies, different parts of the country that maybe haven't benefited from the last 100 years of personal mobility and energy.
Thank you, Jay. I'd like to introduce Colleen Lucas with Anheuser-Busch. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. I'm Colleen Lucas. I'm our Vice President of Community Impact. And so we really have a mission of creating a future, what we call with more cheers, a future that we all can enjoy and enjoy together. And what we do is we aim to leverage the capabilities, relationships, and reach of Anheuser-Busch to build stronger communities in a more sustainable environment. So to say that sustainability is a priority for us is an understatement, because without a healthy environment, we can't make the high quality products that Americans have come to expect from us. And nearly 100% of the ingredients and water for our domestic products are sourced here in the US. So very critical issue for us. And it takes all of us, but certainly we're committed to doing our share to address the problems.
All right, well, thank you, Colleen. Gilbert Castillo from Hyundai Motor. Gilbert.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm Gil Castillo from Hyundai Motor America. We're based out in California, in Fountain Valley, although originally I'm actually from El Paso, Texas. So there's a lot that I've been hearing today that I'm very familiar with. My role at Hyundai is I'm the Senior Group Manager for Vehicle Strategy and Regulatory Compliance. So vehicle strategy is basically about developing and bringing to market the types of cars that consumers really want to buy. But then on the other hand, regulatory compliance is making sure that the types of vehicles that we sell meet or exceed kind of the standards set out for us, emission standards, fuel economy standards. Traditionally, these two roles have been kind of at odds, right? Typically, the consumers have not always bought the cars that have been the most efficient, the cleanest, right? Think large SUVs. But nowadays, the climate is really changing, right? Times are changing. The types of vehicles that are actually in very high demand now, for example, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 is an all-electric vehicle, right? So the mindset is changing, I think. The consumer is now demanding and looking to buy green or electrified products. But at the same time, I think we have to realize or recognize that consumers are still very different and will remain so. And we can't just offer one solution. So we have to think about what are their needs, what are their priorities, what are their resources, right? The purchasing power of all these different communities. And for that reason, we need to be able to develop different types of green solutions, be it hybrid, plug-in hybrid, pure battery electric, and even fuel cell. So I really look forward to this conversation and hearing what everyone here has to say.
Thank you, Gilbert. And my longtime friend and colleague, Angela Manso from the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be up here with this distinguished panel and great to see all of you. I'm so glad this room is so much bigger. We see so many more of you. As Mark said, I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm the National Outreach Director, so my responsibility is to lead, build, manage our external relationships, partnership building, relationship building across the organization. We are headquartered in New York, but we have offices around the world, here in Washington, D.C., where I'm based, as well as California, Chicago. We have offices in Beijing. We are about 50-something years old, We came around in the 1970s. It was a number of lawyers and law students who came together and decided that the planet needed, legal representation. And through their work is where we ended up with the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. And our mission, of course, is to protect the planet and people and all the systems that depend on it. So we're really excited to hear from these guests who are representing the auto industry, but we know that there's so many others, and the beverage industry, and so many others that are doing this work because they understand that in the environment that we find ourselves in the climate, we must adapt. We must change the way we do business. We must change the way the products that we deliver to the public. And we can do it in a way that still adds value, and we can do it in a way that really helps to protect communities, and particularly what we call environmental justice, Black and brown communities, the sacrifice zones, unfortunately, that we find too many of our community living in. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks.
Well, excellent. Let's kick it off with a framing question, pretty generic, pretty large, but our nation's 56 million Latinos are highly susceptible to the issues of the health threats from the inaction on climate change, extreme heat, flooding, drought, wildfires. We live in the communities, especially like California or Texas, where you see a lot of these happening, Florida. Why overall is this such an important issue for everyone, but Latinos in particular? And then why should we care? And what is the impact of inaction? And why are you guys taking action now? Anyone want to start? It's a large framing question. Give me your big vision.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay,
All right.
go ahead. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right,
yeah.
let's frame this. So back in 2016, our organization put out a report, Nuestro Futuro, Climate Change and U.S. Latinos. And we found that, and I'm sure the numbers have changed since, it's been a couple of years, but what we found is basically too many of Latinos live in communities that are greatly impacted, disproportionately impacted by climate. So increasing heat, droughts, wildfires, the like. A substantial number of Latinos work in jobs that put them outdoors, so they are exposed to extreme heat events. In the agriculture industry, we are overrepresented, and we have quite a significant representation in the construction industry. You have that. You compound then with the health conditions, the health vulnerabilities that that community already is experiencing, combining that with this, worsening climate effects. And so you are therefore finding more and more people who are, having these health issues, but because of their economic condition, the economic insecurity, right? We're talking poverty levels, lack of access to health care. You're just further and further, seeing more and more Latinos being impacted without the means, unfortunately, to be able to adapt, without the means to be able to mitigate for these worsening effects. So, not being able to have sufficient money to buy an extra air conditioner because it's gotten so hot during the summers, not being able to get a heat pump, funding for a heat pump in your home, those types of things, or not being able to not have to work outside if it's 95, 100 plus degrees, because we know that that's detrimental to health. So there are a lot of big reasons why we should be talking about this issue.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I think inaction is no longer an option, right? And I think the theme that we've heard and everyone is saying, it does take all of us. We are all responsible for the solution. And so it's the full community effort in both public and private partnerships. That's what it's going to take. And it starts with, and it's not just commitments, right? It's action. And so that's a big emphasis for us. I think we've been working hard as we look across our supply chain to decarbonize, to reduce the water usage in our breweries, to increase the amount of recycled content in our packaging and also increase recycling, as well as to make sustainable ag practices available for our 700 plus growers. But that's the piece that we are directly doing. But what we also see, our power as the leading brewer in the United States is the network of partners. And so it is from the growers to the suppliers to our wholesalers and our retailers and our sports partners and through our consumers. And so we also see that we have a role, acting and getting a message out, connecting to the millions of consumers, adult consumers that enjoy our products. And so, but it starts with acting now, of course.
So, from a transportation perspective, obviously, the goal isn't to transform mobility 50% to electric, 75% to electric. It's 100% to electric, right? And the only way you're going to do that is by getting everyone to convert, right? So that means you have to bring everyone along. But we have to recognize that it's not as easy for some groups as it are maybe for others. So, especially for Latin communities or like lower income communities, many of these folks may not be able to afford an electric vehicle. They are somewhat more expensive right now because of battery costs and such. Another concern could be the fact that many may not have a place to charge at home. right? Many of these folks rent, maybe they live in a high rise, they park on the street or in an open lot where there's no public charging. And then we also have to recognize the fact that many of these communities, they don't purchase new cars, they purchase used cars. And so how do we steer, right, these used car purchases more towards green vehicles and green solutions? So there's that aspect of it too. But from the, another way of looking at it is also is how they're impacted negatively, right? And we just heard that just a little bit ago. In terms of these communities are located in very dense commercial regions where there's high heavy-duty diesel traffic, right? Which negatively affects, of course, the atmosphere. You get high rates of asthma and such. So it's not only about transforming private cars or private ownership into electrified solutions, but it's also about heavy-duty commercial fleets and transitioning that area of transportation to electrified solutions, be it battery-powered or fuel cell-powered.
Yeah, well said. I wish I had said what Gil just said. But,
Say it again.
I'll say something else instead. You know, a couple things. So one, there's greater accountability than there's ever been. And I think that organizations like the NRDC have implemented that on a societal level. So now we're held accountable. We have to report our environmental performance. We have to report our diversity performance. We either have to or choose to expose data about those things in ways that were never even considered 20 years ago or longer. So I think the work of organizations like the NRDC and others has really brought that to the fore. So now our customers demand that we expose our values, not just value, and value is a component of this, but our values as a company, who we are. And you know, we see the results of that in things like the Axios Harris 100 poll. Last year, Patagonia was number 1. I think they're number 2 this year. Last year, Honda was number 2. We slipped a little bit this year. But when you dig into the details of that, why are these brands the most trusted? I was really fascinated by Patagonia because they were popular with red and blue. So they when you drill into the details, now their values are quite clearly aligned with blue. But red respects them because they wear their values on their sleeve. They're a clothing maker. But they don't hide behind that. And you can connect with people on values even if you're not perfectly aligned. I thought that was really interesting. Now, what Gil said is absolutely true. That batteries are, the goal isn't to be partially electrified. And actually, both of our companies are committed to a vision beyond batteries. We're both committed to a vision of hydrogen, because hydrogen is the ultimate renewable fuel. It's abundant, it's around us right now in the air that we're breathing. And that is it's a much further horizon, but it's also much more sustainable. And sustainability is the real key. And language is interesting. The words we choose to use are interesting because sustainability sounds like kind of a buzzword lately. Every company's talking about sustainability. And I think my respected colleagues and myself mean it. Our companies are committed to sustainability. But I think we hear the word so much we forget what it actually stands for. We're not talking about just sustainability as a company or sustainability as a country or sustainability of organizations. We're talking about sustainability of society, that we've got this grand obligation to society that if we don't become sustainable, if we don't stop the effects of climate change and try to reverse them, that as a society, humanity could really suffer the consequences. I think that's a pretty big theme, and I think that gets lost in the conversation sometimes, that we've got this pretty awesome responsibility that we have to live up to. And I don't like that gets lost because of the choice of words we use. I think it's important to go back to that and remember why we're doing this. Why are we pursuing these really grand visions?
One of the big things that we're looking at is how we change the horizon on the climate crisis over the next 8 years, over the next 20 years, over the next 50 years. But it's become much more apparent that things have to happen quicker. Pew Hispanic recently did a poll, actually last year. 8 out of 10 Latinos hold climate crisis in high concern of theirs, and 7 out of 10 Latinos say they're already experiencing it in their communities. And so some of the horizon-changing things that have to happen is establishing clean infrastructure. We can no longer afford to build a new oil pipeline that's going to work for 30 years, or a methane peaker plant that's going to be up, or we need to build that clean infrastructure now, and industry is going to lead on that for the sustainability and for the future. Tell us about the importance of your investments that you're making, long-term investments that you have to make at every point in your manufacturing process to be able to achieve what you want to achieve in the timeline that you're looking at.
Since I waited, I'll jump in
Yeah.
on this one, and you were looking at me anyway. We just last week we announced that we're making a $4.4 billion investment in a joint venture factory with LG Energy Systems in the United States, and I think the commitments are massive. I think maybe diverting from your question just a little bit, but. One of the exciting things about that is that it means jobs, it means energy independence, it means a whole bunch of things that have great value to society. The jobs component means new jobs, and our vision, Honda's vision, is we have this vision. We've been talking about this lately about resource circulation. So let me back up a little bit. Last year, April, Honda had a new president. This was a guy who spent his entire career developing internal combustion engines. He became president of Global Honda, and he said, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. By 2040, we will make our last internal combustion engine because we're not going to consume fossil fuels for mobility. We're not going to cause that. By 2050, we will be carbon neutral as a company, not just in the manufacturing of our products, but in the use of our products as well. So we'll procure renewable energy downstream for all of our customers using our products. That triggered a whole bunch of work, and when he said that in April of 2021, it sounded really bold. So we set very clear targets. 40% electrified vehicles. We're less than 1% of what we sell today. 40% of what we sell by 2030 will be electric. 80% by 2035, and 100% by 2040. Now, this is a guy who spent his whole career trying to get that last little bit of efficiency out of internal combustion engines. None of us expected the first words out of his mouth would be, we're not doing that anymore. We're going a different path. It was really bold. And then immediately we saw our competitors say things that were even more bold. So now we're trying to speed up and accelerate that. We can't do it soon enough. We know that the climate is changing. Now, it's important to distinguish, and this is going to sound like a horrible pun, and I apologize, but I think the point is strong. It's important to distinguish climate from weather, even in what we're talking about. There are short-term effects. So, factories have to be adapted, and that means change. And change is difficult for people. Going from the known to the unknown is uncomfortable. So in the short term, we have to endure some weather as we establish a new business climate that is more sustainable. But in the long term, we see the benefits of being safer for people, for being sustainable society. There's so many downstream benefits of this that eventually we know we have to do this. We can't continue to pollute. We can't continue to have tailpipe emissions. We have to change that. That will affect communities locally because the whole notion of environmental justice is benefited from changing that paradigm, from not having tailpipe emissions, from not having high concentrations of noxious gases in certain areas. Yeah. But it also means that there will be new jobs. If we have this vision of resource circulation, that means we have to bring vehicles back into the system. Our dream is that new Hondas are made out of old Hondas, and we want to be able to fulfill that by 2050. That also means jobs. There's a lot of opportunity in all these changes, but it's painful to go through the change.
Thanks, Jay.
I think we'll move on down. So I think in the last 2 years alone, we've spent over $100 million in CapEx for sustainability initiatives. One such example is converting our LA brewery to solar power, which is now the largest US brewery operating on solar. We also last year achieved a goal of ours of sourcing all of our purchased electricity from renewable sources, and which included investing in wind and solar farms in Oklahoma and Texas. So certainly have been making strides, setting goals and accomplishing those goals. Last year, though, at the end of last year, as a global company, we did set a net zero ambition by 2040. And that has certainly, we're already acting here in the US, and that requires us to look at every aspect of the supply chain, right? So we are working and putting in incentives for our growers to implement soil health practices so they can reduce their emissions and reduce their crop losses. We are investing in zero emission fleet. And so, we are investing in those commercial vehicles. We've got electric vehicles in California now, and we're doubling that fleet here by the end of the year. We are also investing in piloting hydrogen for longer haul because we know that is the future, as well as piloting in Texas as well. So we're making some of those investments certainly there as well. And then as we look to, we've piloted a low carbon can, and now we're looking to scale that. Our Bud Light Next recent innovation is climate neutral certified. And so, we're looking at a bunch of opportunities. But then it's about that network I referenced. And so for us, it's looking at how do we take some of these practices that we have, whether it's getting carbon accounting in place, to how do I do a power purchase agreement, to how do I procure electric vehicles, and we're bringing those to our supplier network. So we have a program called Eclipse where we bring these to our supplier network. We're also bringing it to our wholesalers. And so really trying to then expand some of these practices within our network. So that's kind of the beginning, in addition to really charting out a full map that includes our first carbon neutral brewery next year, and then a roadmap to go hit all of our brewery operations across the country.
Where's that carbon neutral brewery going to be?
Cartersville, Georgia.
Cool. All right. Gilbert?
I think you're going to find that a lot of the responses that I give are going to be very similar to Jay's. I think we're both come from a very similar standpoint. So Hyundai itself is looking to establish itself as an EV leader, right? And it's put in place a lot of different programs and projects to ensure that happens. For one, I think Hyundai is only second to Tesla. The Hyundai Group is only second to Tesla in terms of EV sales. Hyundai will have 22 electrified vehicles by 2025. The Genesis brand will be pure electric by 2030. And then to support all that, we've announced $5.5 billion in a new EV factory and battery manufacturing facility in Georgia. That factory will break ground next year. I think it'll come online early in 2025, and it has the capacity to build 300,000 electric vehicles, right? So there is definite action taking place from the EV front, electric battery front. But Hyundai is actually so much more than just that. Hyundai globally is a huge company, and so we're also investing in the hydrogen economy. So hydrogen fuel cell is not just passenger cars. We have a Nexo, which is a small little SUV, it's a fuel cell, but it's also about commercial fleets, like we were talking about, heavy-duty freight. So we have programs in place now with the state of California to replace drayage trucks. Drayage trucks are the ones that carry the container cargo or container ships from the ports. Those drayage trucks tend to be the dirtiest that you can find because they're actually the oldest trucks. When you can't drive a truck cross-country, you use them for drayage, right? So it's about replacing those trucks. But hydrogen fuel cell has potential beyond that. There's marine, there's freight, there's actually air mobility. So Hyundai has created a company called Supernal to develop urban air mobility where you're using basically electricity, in this case fuel cell, to provide short-range commercial flight. And then there's other stuff, right? We're also having other types of ventures that can support sustainable investment here in North America and elsewhere. I think combined, our total investments in the US are about $10 billion through 2025 in different areas and different aspects for sustainability.
And Angela, we know, and we all know, that the UN panel on climate crisis has indicated that we've got 8 years to reverse the growth of carbon emissions so that they're falling in order for us to have any chance of avoiding 1.5 degree growth in our temperature, to avoid the most catastrophic effects of the climate crisis. And every morning, I'll wake up to my clips or a newspaper and I'll see another thing that's happening, whether that's wildfires or Arctic shelf melting or this or that. And they all start with, the scientists didn't predict this happening this fast. So when I say the scientists, this panel was made of scientists. And when they said we had 12 years, they said that 4 years ago. We're going to be seeing that this is going to speed up. And the effects that one thing happens on another, that wildfires happen on this, and a butterfly flapping its wings happens on that, is going to be great. The echo. Jay talked about how industry is constantly becoming more and more ambitious. And states like California are becoming more and more ambitious. And they're forcing industry to become more and more ambitious. What is the importance of industry investment and making that investment increasingly ambitious on how we can solve the climate crisis?
Say the tough question.
Yes, I did.
You know, as I was listening to folks give their responses, where my thoughts were it's great that we're considering different sources of energy. And it's great that there are goals for industry to make these changes. But we also have to be thinking about what we're delivering right now to communities, right? I wish we had someone who represented local government, perhaps on this panel, who could talk about what are the things that local government can do right now, whether it's changing the public transit fleets, right? Decarbonizing the buildings, a lot of the older structures that, you know, we're focused so much on the new construction, but we're not focusing on where people are living right now, which are older buildings that don't, you know, they're not sustainable. They don't protect us in the ways that we need to. And I think that these 8 years, I mean, we're in a marathon phase now, right? It's almost a sprint. I used to be a runner, so it's like I was a long distance sprinter, and it's like, yeah, we're about there. We're about ready to get into a sprint. I am grateful that industry is making these changes, and we need to be talking more about that. We need to be letting the public know, hey, these are the things that we are working towards. And also, you know, while they're making these investments in these communities, whether it's building a new plant or a new brewery and what have you, really working with the local communities and finding out, okay, what's there already that isn't not necessarily connected to your industry, but it is going to help that community be able to create the environment that they need to thrive and survive. In outreach and the work that I'm doing, you know, I'm not just looking at other environmental organizations saying, okay, let's all come together. We're looking at other organizations whose work is dependent on us being able to, you know, have a democracy, is one. Our work is dependent on people being able to participate in the political process, because all of that impacts our ability to have a clean climate, thriving businesses, thriving communities, all of those things. So I would simply say, if you can, you know, it's great that you're making these investments for your business, but also be looking at these communities and what other investments can be made there so that they can also deliver for their communities and in these ways, whether it's, you know, not constructing polluting facilities near schools. You know, folks need to get into that fight, making sure that, you know, we're diminishing the cumulative impacts in many of these communities. That we're not allowing areas where Black and brown people live to be considered, you know, sacrifice zones, as I mentioned earlier. It's important for the public to see that not only are you doing good business, but you're doing good by the community beyond what is in the interest of your company.
I think I have time for one more quick question before we open it to Q&A, so please start thinking about your questions. The Latino community is what I like to call cultural conservationists. We learn about conservationism not from becoming a member of an organization, but we learn it from what I like, the back of a chancla. It's like, close the door, don't use the, you know, close the fridge, eat all your food, don't waste, reuse, repurpose. It's constant. And it's not necessarily the concept of the environment or conservation, but it's the concept of that we need to respect the land, that our ancestors, that our parents, our grandparents often came from an agrarian society, from our countries of origin, that we had a one-to-one relationship with the land and the water. We understood it. And so that's been continued to be passed on. And it's been very important for us to be able to recognize that the products we buy, the food, it always amazes me in this day and age, and I've got a young family, and my investment in clean air through air purifiers, my investment in clean water through water purifiers, my investment in organic food so that we could eat. I mean, my grandmother, we talk about organic food, and she said, you know what that used to be called? It used to be called food. And so we're paying for what industry has been doing, many industries have been doing. We're paying both ways, coming and going. But it's something that our community really feels like they need to do for their children. And so for us, when it comes to vehicles or consumer products, we're often looking for the green alternative. We're also looking for affordability. When it comes to cars, fortunately, the recently signed IRA bill had a tax break for used EVs, which they didn't have before because, a $90,000 Tesla isn't in a lot of people's range. But then there's also issues of where these electric vehicle chargers are. Not everyone has a home where they can put their own electric vehicle charger. And so how's industry addressing the disproportionate needs and socioeconomic situation that Latinos find themselves in to be able to make sure that those consumers can be satisfied with what the products are that are there for them?
First of all,
and I keep looking at you. I'm
I know,
sorry.
yeah. So I'll start. It's
lean
okay.
over.
Should we? I can wait.
Sure. No. Feel free.
Okay. So first of all, you're welcome in my house because I've got a 15-year-old who has a hard time turning the lights off when she leaves a room. So if you could help with that.
Back of a chancla solves everything.
I said I grew up in a small town. We grew our own food, and you're right. It's funny because we pay a premium for that now, but it was the way a lot of us were raised. And I'm not Latino, but my family was pretty granola in the 70s and 80s, and that was how we ate. No, I think this goes back to what I was saying before about this moment in time. We get to change our relationship with personal mobility and energy, and that means that inflection point means there will be a lot of opportunity. And as you say, not everybody has access to a new electric vehicle at $90,000. One of our core values as a company is value. So we have values as a company, we have a philosophy as a company, but and those are noble values. That's why I stay with this company. But value is one of those, and affordability. Our corporate mantra, our corporate philosophy incorporates language around value of providing excellent products at low cost, to make them available. I think a modern way of saying that is we try to democratize new vehicles. I think a really good example of this, and it's 20 years old now, but it's the playbook that we're working from. 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, 2003, Honda made a very bold declaration called Safety for Everyone. And way in advance of regulations, we said we will apply vehicle stability control on all of our light trucks, and that was almost 10 years before that became a regulation by NHTSA. We will apply front airbags, side airbags, and side curtain airbags as standard equipment. Anyway, I don't need to go through the list, but it was 6 safety features. We were way ahead of regulation. We were way ahead of the industry. But when we played that card, it forced the industry to keep up, and that was a game changer. And we think of that. At the time, we said, we think we can change the direction of the industry. We can make these features standard and protect everybody. Safety for everyone. And what we really meant by that was democratizing safety, that it shouldn't be at a premium. You shouldn't have to buy the most expensive trim level of the most expensive car to get all those safety features. We should make that accessible to everyone. I think this is the time for us to do the same thing with clean mobility. And that has benefits for all of society. We have to democratize that. Now, Honda has already announced that our first two modern BEVs. We've made BEVs. We had the EV Plus back in 1999, so we were one of the first companies to make battery electric vehicles, and we've made several since then. But our first high volume BEVs will be partnership vehicles with another automaker that will go on sale a little over a year from now. But by 2028, we will have what we're calling AEVs, affordable electric vehicles. Sub $30,000 is our target to make them more available. Now, if you follow the industry, what's happened with new cars, especially basic economics, supply and demand. What's happened during the pandemic is we've had supply chain shortages, we've had chip shortages, we've had labor shortages, we've had supply disruption for things that are imported. Honda makes the majority of what we sell here, and more than 75% of what we sell in the United States, we make in the United States. We're actually the third manufacturer with US content, number 3. And that might be surprising when you consider that one of those companies we've displaced is based in Detroit. But when we look at this affordable BEV, when we look at what we can do, we really want to change that paradigm for the whole industry and make electrification affordable to everybody. The other part of that is charging, as you said. Not everybody lives in a single family home. I have a charger in my home. I live in a single family home. Not everybody can do that. We have to make investments in DC fast charging is the good way to do that out of home. We have to, as an industry, we have to make investments in that. We're in the process of that. We just had a meeting with our company president to propose a frightening, staggering investment in that. But if we don't make those investments, and if we don't make those investments where they matter, not just in suburban areas, but in other areas, then making the affordable BEV and then providing access to charging won't make a difference. So we have to do it all together, and we've got to understand how we can affect communities that haven't had access to that in the past. Sorry, long answer.
So different perspective, obviously different industry. For us as a leader in our industry, we feel that it's incumbent on us to be then leading in these initiatives that then is allowing us to deliver the highest quality products to our consumers in a very sustainable way. And so the things that we're doing are going to be then across all of our products. So all of our products are now brewed with 100% renewable electricity. When we do things to support our 700 plus growers they grow other things besides the things that go into our beers. And so there's an effect beyond the things that we use and we purchase from them. When we do a watershed project, there's a benefit beyond the water that we need in our brewing process. And so, we do see ourselves and our impact in the community beyond just what we're using and what we're doing. And as the leader in the industry, it's incumbent of us that when people are buying our products, they can trust that we've made every effort to deliver that product to them in the most sustainable way. And I think one other thing we're doing is we're also then trying to get consumers involved. So I opened with that. We have what we call a relationship with millions of consumers, adult consumers in this country. And so something we just did is we actually just united, we're also the largest sports sponsor in the country and in our industry, and we just united those sports partners around a program called the National Recycling League with the mission of kind of eliminating waste and tackling the issue of waste in professional sports. And is it just about reducing the waste in professional sports venues that could be and should be recycled? Absolutely that, something we can easily measure, but it's about changing behavior. It's about the call to action that it takes all of us. And it's something as simple as choosing to recycle when you can, that if we all do it, we can have collectively a bigger impact. And so I think it's also finding relatable ways to have a call to action to a broad audience.
And Gilbert, real quick, I want to be able to have one question at least. So sorry.
Okay, so I agree with what Jay was saying. So right now, EVs are somewhat more expensive. A large portion of that cost is because of batteries. So battery material costs are very high. They're actually increasing, not decreasing. A lot of it is attributed to near-term issues, supply issues. But long-term, everyone, the industry, Hyundai included, is making the investments to bring down battery costs to ensure that by past 2025, BEVs will be significantly more affordable. Beyond that, though, I think it's important. It goes back to what I said earlier, which is we have to meet individuals where they're at, and that means we can't just provide one single solution. For some individuals, a plug-in hybrid makes more sense. It's more relatable to their driving cycles and habits. For others, it could be hybrid. And then the other thing I want to mention is just that we have to be industry ourselves. We have to engage with government, with NGOs, to work together, right, to ensure that we can come up with programs that'll help these EJ communities. Like right now, Hyundai's working with CARB, which is the California Air Resources Board, to develop some kind of program that will bring about more affordable EVs, new or used, right, for these communities. And then just one last thing, going beyond just selling of cars, we're working on a project called Hyundai Home. So Hyundai Home is basically, we're developing an ecosystem where if you buy a car, you can also buy the home charger, you can buy the battery pack, you can buy the solar cells for your house, right? So it's an all-in-one kind of package. And that actually hopefully will be coming to market very soon.
And hopefully we'll just take one question and then hopefully build in your closing comments.
Okay, let's do it.
Morning to all. I'm Javier Rubajovet. I run policy for CESA, the Solar Energy Storage Association of Puerto Rico, policy-focused NGO on these topics. Good morning, and great to see my compatriot Angela. Always great, and all of you. Congratulations for all the work you're doing. It's a comment, a call to action for awareness. We're all celebrating the IRA. The IRA is awesome. But as you know, usually Puerto Rico and the territories are forgotten in processes. The House version was great. We all know that the ITC is the best incentive for solar in the universe. It has never floated Puerto Rico because we are not in the same tax system. So the call to action and the call to awareness is Puerto Rico is one of the largest Latino communities that is directly impacted by climate change. We all remember Hurricane Maria, 4,000 dead. My call to you all and all in the room is now that we have the IRA in force, we have to land in Treasury and EPA regs that the benefits of stuff flows in the territories. I mean, there's some wonky statutory language in that bill that could make it work for Puerto Rico, definitely in EVs. For the first time, EV incentives flowing, but I think if we don't mention Puerto Rico and the regs, really, at the Treasury is going to be harder. And the same thing, there's for the first time an ITC that could flow directly in Puerto Rico for the first time ever for nonprofits, which is critical. Nonprofits were critical after Maria, and for local governments, right? So if all of a sudden, like municipalities and nonprofits have 30% off for solar and storage, could be game-changing in Puerto Rico. But I call to you to be aware of this and keep Puerto Rico in your radar so we can land these wins.
Yeah, and when we talk about Latinos living on the front lines of environmental degradation and environmental and climate crisis caused health emergencies, Puerto Rico's at the front of that. And Puerto Rico not being eligible for so many benefits has exacerbated that situation, including even now with the IRA that they just passed, not eligible for some of the pharmaceutical benefits, for a lot of the things that are in there. And these are citizens in Puerto Rico, so I thank you for bringing that up. And Angela, I don't know if you wanted to talk about it?
No, simply, great point. There is a lot in the IRA that is really great. It's not an endpoint, it's a beginning. We know that some of our EJ partners wish that it had gone further in many respects. But to your point about including the territories and Puerto Rico, absolutely on the mark. Mm-hmm. There is so much opportunity to create change on the island. As you mentioned, I am from there, from San Juan. And all my life, I've never understood why we don't do more in renewables and solar and wind down there. It's unfathomable to me that we are not investing more heavily in that and being a leader for the country to show how it works and how it can be affordable for many communities. So I wholly agree with you on that.
I want to thank this panel. There is an ancient proverb that says, may you live in interesting times. For some, they say it's a curse as well. Mm-hmm. But we definitely are living in interesting times. We're seeing it in front of us every day. We know that this is a historical moment, a documentary moment, where we're going to be looked at future generations that are going to say, what did you do when you had an opportunity to save us? What did you do? Were you there? Did you fight for our future? And so it's for all of us to do, activists, politicians, business, to come together to be able to fight what can be solved. This climate crisis isn't beyond us. We have the capability of doing this together. And so I appreciate your interest. Stay interested. greenlatinos.org if you're interested in our group. Follow each of these leaders and the work that they're doing. And I want to make sure that I'm passing you on to the next event of the day. Please join us back in the main room for the luncheon plenary titled Achieving Equity, a discussion on racism as a public health issue. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Thank you.